Okay, back by popular demand, part 2 of the Edmund Fitzgerald series. Thanks everyone for watching the video, especially those who listen to it all the way through. It's not for everybody, but like I said, it's how my mind works. I think about it all the time, and it's been kind of fun talking about it. And there's been a lot of responses and messages sent to me asking about more details, as when I was just going off the top of my head with all of this, I was definitely leaving some things out, and that's why I felt like I could do a part 2. And there's been more than enough people that have written in and asked to have me talk about it some more, and I will. So if you bear with me, I got my drink. I have some Christmas cakes. I mean, am I going to go chocolate? Am I going to go regular? I don't know. We'll just see how this goes. So I'm going to do my best to go chronologically the best I can. I may end up jumping all over the place, but this is just how my mind works thinking about the wreck. So when the Edmund Fitzgerald went down, it had a history of doing more routes than all of the other ships in the area. They could do about 50 trips a year, going from the Superior, Wisconsin area down to the Detroit, Michigan area 50 times a year, whereas all the other boats were unable to do that many trips. And over the course of those 50 trips of the 26 tons of iron ore, they said that just one load from the Edmund Fitzgerald could create about 350,000, it was 350,000 vehicles from the one shipment of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So then you take that 350,000 vehicles times the 50 routes that they would take a year, and then the Edmund Fitzgerald in and of itself did about 17 years of service. The grand total was somewhere along the lines of like 6 million vehicles by one ship, the Edmund Fitzgerald, which is just insane to think about. But the lifestyle that these guys did to achieve the 50 trips a year, it was a 9-month-a-year workload that these guys had, meaning that they worked on the ship the entire 9 months with hardly a break at all. And it would be 24/7 in terms of the 9 months that they were on the Edmund Fitzgerald, either loading, unloading, or ferrying, making the trip between spots. So whether they got there at 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, 9 p.m. at night, didn't matter. Whenever they would arrive to load or unload, everybody in the ship got up and did the jobs that they needed to do. So it was a true 24/7 job that they had for those 9 months out of the year, with a 3-month break typically over the months of December, January, February, when a lot of the lakes were finally frozen over. Crazy lifestyle to think about that, but that's what was asked of them, and that's what the job called for. So when the Edmund Fitzgerald was first brought on to port to function as a ship, they had a big ceremony for it because, of course, it was the largest ship that was ever created for this purpose. And when they did the ceremony, they said that about 5,000 to 10,000 people were there in attendance to watch this event happen. And anytime that you bring a ship into sea or into the lakes, of course, you have to break the champagne bottle over that boat, kind of as a form of good luck. Well, Edmund Fitzgerald, the name, was actually the president at the time of Northwestern Mutual Financial Company. And they named the ship after him because Northwestern Mutual owned the ship, getting into the shipping business as a part of their venture capital. And so Edmund Fitzgerald was there with his wife to bless the ship. And Edmund Fitzgerald's wife was in charge of breaking the champagne bottle over the ship. She failed the first time, which is bad luck. She did it a second time, failed again. That is very bad luck. And on the third time, she was able to break the champagne bottle over the ship. However, that's obviously not a very good start. There's more to it. As the ship finally goes into port, the sheer size and weight of it splashing into the water created this huge wave through the entire port and pier, actually having the Edmund Fitzgerald kind of crash into the side of the port itself and then coming back. But it was such a huge catastrophic moment that they said that one of the people of the 5,000 to 10,000 that were in attendance literally had a heart attack and died after that event happened. So there were like multiple strange things that occurred even at the very beginning of the Edmund Fitzgerald's existence. After that, it was in service for about 17 years without hardly any drama. In fact, kind of the contrary, it was creating such an incredible reputation of itself, being able to withstand any events that was happening, weather-wise, as I said before, doing more shipments than anyone else, just creating an incredible reputation for itself. So then, of course, the voyage that started on November 9th and ended November 10th, 50 years ago. As I said in the previous video, the sister ship, the Arthur Anderson, and the Edmund Fitzgerald were traveling together, and they had to make the decision of going south or north with the storm that was coming. And they decided to go north, knowing that that would be the safer bet. However, the weather was still so bad that the Edmund Fitzgerald lost its radar, it was boating blind, and when it got to about the most northern part of Lake Superior, they did basically like a 90-degree turn and going straight down south. There was an issue with this route, however. Although they felt like they were avoiding the intensity of the storm, by taking this route and going straight south down the east side of Lake Superior, they were running across a very small island called Caribou Island. And the big problem with Caribou Island is that the depth of the lake goes down tremendously. And when you're thinking about a 730-foot long ship carrying 26,000 tons of iron over the water that is already very rough in that moment, the overall depth of the area around Caribou Island was said to be anywhere with only like 12 to 9 feet of depth. So when you have a ship that large and you're kind of boating blind and your only source of radar is the ship that's 15, 20 miles behind you, it's putting yourself in a really difficult situation. This is when the controversy of kind of what exactly happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald begins, because the ship underneath the water at some point broke completely in half. So when you talk about the wreckage at the bottom of the lake, the ship itself is broken into two pieces, with the two pieces being roughly 300 feet apart from each other. So did it break at the surface? Did it break underneath the surface? Nobody knows. But where the controversy begins around Caribou Island is that they believe that it was very possible that the Edmund Fitzgerald bottomed out several times, making its way past Caribou Island, puncturing the vessel down below, starting to take in water. There were multiple reports from the Captain McSorley of the Edmund Fitzgerald saying they were taking in water. However, they did get their pumps going, and it was kind of equaling out for a while. For as much water as the ship was taking in, equal amounts were being pumped out. And so they're making their way past Caribou Island. They're taking in water. They're taking damage. Things aren't looking very good. And the other tragedy of this whole thing is that Captain McSorley was literally on his last voyage with the ship. His wife, who was already sick with arthritis, other health issues, had recently come down with a stroke. And so she had to live in a nursing home. Well, of course, even back then, nursing homes were very expensive, as they are today. And Captain McSorley promised his wife that this would be his final voyage, his last shipment, and when that job was done, he would be there for her to take care of her for the rest of her life. Now, Captain McSorley had the ultimate highest respect and reputation among the Great Lake captains. even his competition, his enemies, if you will, were highly respectful of the man. He did more over the course of time than any other captain. He was known as the best of the best. And with him doing his final voyage, there were multiple people on the ship as well that have been with him during these 17 years with the Edmund Fitzgerald that were also set to retire. They said that, I believe it was 5 of the 29 that went down with the ship was supposed to be on their final voyage that day. And just adds to the story and how kind of sad the whole thing is. Break time. So they were taken in water past Caribou Island, and the ship behind them stay in communication with them. At about 7 p.m. is when they asked Captain McSorley the famous question, like, how is the Fitz holding up? And he said, we are holding our own. That was at 7:10 p.m. as they were approaching Whitefish Bay. So at 7:10, he had made that communication. 5 minutes later, at 7:15, they had lost complete radar contact with the Edmund Fitzgerald. Arthur Anderson was about 15, 20 miles behind, but they kept in contact not only through phone, but through radar. And the Edmund Fitzgerald completely disappeared off of the radar of the Arthur Anderson 5 minutes later. There was no distress signal. There were no SOS calls from Captain McSorley, who again is the best of the best. You would think that if something was slowly, tragically happening, that there would have been a call, there would have been an SOS of some kind, but there wasn't. So it makes you believe that there's a high probability that something happened quickly. And again, controversial, all kinds of different theories out there, but it is undeniable that this was a storm of storms that the ship was going through, especially even with that short distance of only 15 miles apart. It was drastically different for the Edmund Fitzgerald as it was the Arthur Anderson. I've seen reports online showing that in the worst moments of that storm, there was sustained winds of 65 miles per hour, gusts up to 90 to 95 miles per hour. Now, hurricane winds start at 74 miles per hour. So for anyone who's ever been through a hurricane before, you can understand that, 90 to 95 miles an hour out in the middle of a humongous lake. The lake is the size of South Carolina, literally. It's a massive, massive body of water. And it's 7 o'clock at night in November, worst weather conditions, 95 mile per hour winds. And the waves is usually what I think about the most of like what would be so terrifying about being out in that ship at that moment. They were saying that the waves were climbing anywhere between 20 feet and 30 feet high. Now, this is fresh water. This is not salt water. So they say that with salt water, waves can kind of roll, so to speak, whereas fresh water, it's a lot more sharp. It's a lot more harsh and narrow. And also with fresh water, they have what's called sister waves, where it's not just one single wave followed by a gap and then another wave. Typically, sister waves come in 2 or 3 right next to each other in fresh water. So it's dark as can be, 95 mile per hour winds, snow, freezing rain, no radar, pitch black. And when you can see something amongst the lights of the Edmund Fitzgerald, you are looking at 30-foot waves crashing down on you. To put it in perspective, a 2-story house is 25 feet high. So if you were to stand out of your home and look up and imagine that that is a wave that is crashing down on you with possibly another one and another one right behind it, I can't even imagine how terrifying that entire scenario had to have been. Most people tend to think that it was a sister wave of that 25 to 30 feet on top of the fact that the Edmund Fitzgerald was already taking in some water that ultimately, for lack of a better word, kind of drowned the ship. that it crashed over the top of it, followed by another, and the ship was just never able to come back up to surface. There's all kinds of different theories out there as to exactly how it happened, but I tend to believe that was probably it. When you're talking about a ship so long, so heavy, with water coming down over the top of it and probably water coming out from underneath it, it's just a combination of bad things that occurred that night, and obviously happened quickly because there was no distress signal. So kind of crazy. When the more I think about it, like the more scary and fascinating it is all at the same time. So today, every November 10th, there's a church in downtown Detroit called the Detroit Mariner Cathedral. And obviously the Detroit area is where the Edmund Fitzgerald was supposed to end up ultimately, but didn't. But to honor those 29 men that were lost from the wreck, every November 10th, the Mariner Cathedral rings its bell 29 times on November 10th. They also add a 30th ring for literally everyone else that has ever been lost from wreckages from the Great Lakes. Really cool tribute that they pay to all of that. So, you know, there's the Edmund Fitzgerald song, there's the cathedral, and then at Whitefish Bay, where the Edmund Fitzgerald did sink 15 miles offshore from there, they did years later send a scuba team down to the Edmund Fitzgerald, and they cut out its original bell. And after they cut it out and brought it up to shore, they refurbished it, and it is now on display at the Whitefish Bay Shipwreck Museum. I have not been there. Apparently my guy Travis from BHS, class of 2000, go Bulldogs, has just been there recently, and he posted a picture on my first video. That is so cool. I'm very jealous that he's already been there. I gotta get there and check that out. So there's that, and then I know in the Duluth Superior area as well, at the lighthouse, they also honor the Edmund Fitzgerald as well. It has really kind of seemed to take on a life of its own. I thought I was just basically like just the Midwestern people would be the only ones who are really into this, but it really seems to be growing all the time. And of course, for me, I think it's really cool. I think that's all I got for. I'm sure that as soon as I stop this, I'll think of some other stuff too. But there's just so many interesting little facts and interesting things that almost add to the eeriness of the story. The other thing I do recall now, in the song "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald," they mention the cook being unable to cook for the men of the Edmund Fitzgerald while they were in the midst of the storm. True story about the cook of the Edmund Fitzgerald. He was not supposed to be there in terms of that voyage. Apparently, the original cook of the Edmund Fitzgerald was sick with ulcers, and so he couldn't make that voyage. So they actually called their backup cook to come on board and feed the men during the final voyage, which obviously it was the final voyage for a very different and sad reason. So hope you guys enjoyed it. That finishes part 2. Will there be a part 3? I'm sure I could, but we'll just wrap that up for now. I'm gonna enjoy my Christmas cake and soda, and y'all have a good one.